All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to, I guess this is episode five, of the Discourse Education podcast. This is a podcast where we break down current affairs, and basically analyze it and explain it for the benefit of students in Singapore taking the A levels general paper, which is most of you. And yeah, so the explanations are going to be pitched at an appropriate level where they would, understand or at least find it easier to understand all these things. And yeah, despite that, if you're an international viewer, um, and you come across this video, hopefully this helps clarify some things, I suppose. So, and yeah, let's get started. We are going to be talking about three issues today. So I'm not sure if the podcast is going to go longer. Hopefully not, but yeah, the past week has been, quite eventful, I guess, across the globe. And certainly, not least, the updates, regarding Israel and Hamas as well. How South Africa had essentially submitted, I guess, a resolution, UN resolution, decrying Israel's actions as a form of genocide, things like that. But we're not going to talk about that. Instead, we are going to be talking about some other issues, so that students taking A levels general paper in Singapore can use these case studies as examples. So, the first issue we're going to be talking about today is the very recent Taiwanese elections that took place in, I believe it was Saturday, 13th of January. Right. So what happened during the elections? Very simple. The Taiwanese voted for Lai Qingde, right? Who essentially is gonna be the next president of Taiwan, and of course, he's a member of the Democratic Progressive Party in Taiwan, or the Minjindang, and this party has been the ruling party for the past, according to Reuters here, for the past three terms, right? So including this current run, that just literally started. The DPP has been in power ever since, and of course we know that the previous president was Tsai Ing-wen, right? And yeah, so let's break down the significance of this particular elections. The idea, simply put, is that Lai Qingde, like his predecessor, has taken on essentially a stance when it comes to their foreign policy that they regard Taiwan as independent. They regard Taiwan as independent. But why is this particularly, contentious, I guess, especially when we look at the rising tensions that's occurring between China and Taiwan as a whole, right? So to understand this, what we need to understand really is the historical context. As per usual, we always break down the historical context because, well, number one, we also teach H2 history here. Number two, personally, I believe that history is incredibly important to understand the underpinning contexts behind, all these world issues, and why things are happening the way that they do, and also to spot, common patterns and all that. Right. So essentially, in the early 20th century, which was like, I suppose, almost 100 years ago now, um, after the Second World War, the Civil War resumed. Previously, it occurred, but then it was put on hold when the Japanese invaded. But the civil war between the Communist Party, right, the Chinese Communist Party, right, so the 共产党, and the 国民党, which was the I believe it was called the Republican Party, all right, that took place, and obviously the two leaders were these guys, right, Mao Zedong, okay, and in English his name is Chiang Kai-shek, but 蒋介石 lah, right? So the CCP won, as we know, and they are obviously currently still in power under Xi Jinping right now. Or at least as of filming this video here on January 2024. So when the CCP won, the KMT, the 国民党, they essentially went across the straits and set up base at Taiwan, and they publicly declare back then that Taiwan would be the Republic of China. So to be clear, the full name of China right now is the People's Republic of China. So ever since that occurred, right, Jiang Jieshi going over the straits and all that, tensions have always been high between China and Taiwan, namely, because of the, or at least during the 20th century, it was due to the ideological differences. But even in the modern day, it's, I wouldn't say more complex, but certainly slightly more complicated, I guess. The idea is very simple. China sees Taiwan as part of them, all right? So what that means is that any public acknowledgement of Taiwanese independence, quote unquote, all right, would officially be condemned by China as a whole. So the thing is that when Lai Qingde won the elections, he won it, obviously not just on the platform of foreign relations, but also domestic policies as well. But we're not really going to delve into that. We need to understand that Lai Qingde, his stance on Taiwanese relationship with China, as I said earlier, right, it mirrors Tsai Ing-wen's one. And that is that there is simply, how do I put this delicately? An official, I guess, opposition to recognizing Taiwan as part of China, simply put, all right? So the thing is that, under the whole one China, two systems foreign policy that China has had for decades now, they obviously wouldn't agree with, having the Minjintang or the DPP, in this case, win the elections again, because obviously the best situation for China would be to have a leader in place that would work towards integrating Taiwan under China in itself. Maybe perhaps not entirely the same system that China has, but at the very least to officially, acknowledge that yes, Taiwan is part of China. That's the best case scenario for China themselves, and in the worst case scenario, they would try and take Taiwan by force. That's why for the past few years, you have seen, many headlines of, military exercises conducted by China near the Taiwanese Straits, right? And of course, likewise, Taiwan doing the same thing and having them being supported by some of their traditional allies like USA or Japan or so on and so forth. So the thing here is that when Lai Qingde won the elections, and this is the thing that I really want to hone in on, right? As you can see here, according to the Guardian article, there were a whole bunch of nations, including us here in Singapore, that congratulated Lai Qingde for his victory. And that in turn, drew China's ire. They weren't happy about it. So this touches on a point about international relations, right? And this is why in the context of general paper, I usually try not to advise my students to do this topic because it is quite a complicated affair, right? But to put it very simply, when it comes to international relations, foreign policy, I believe I explained this in one of my previous videos. Oftentimes it boils down to national interests. That's the main thing. But the second thing about IR, international relations, is essentially the optics of the situation. So if nations, or rather their governments, were to congratulate the current incumbent, right, Lai Ching-te, on his victory, it may edge close to an official recognition of Taiwan as a sovereign state. And that would piss China off to no end. I mean, as you can see here, right, in this particular headline, China is really not happy about global leaders, just simply congratulating him for his victory at the elections. Because if other countries did that, right, it is tantamount to their official recognition, which also means that they don't recognize China's claims over Taiwan as being, a part of China itself. So when it comes to maneuvering all these diplomatic relations, it can get really quite tricky simply because, there's a lot of history to unpack there. There's a lot of contextual understanding that needs to be understood as well, right? Now, the next point that we want to touch on really is, students may ask then, okay, so why wouldn't, let's say Taiwan just officially, accept themselves as being part of China, and they may not necessarily have the same system. That means, let's just paint a hypothetical scenario. If Taiwan were to maintain the current system that they have, just officially under China, sort of like what's happening at Hong Kong right now, then what's the, what's stopping them from doing so? Well, couple of things. Number one, if you look at what's happening at Hong Kong for the past several years, I guess, ever since the whole law that was passed on the expatriation of criminals back to PRC, there have been a lot of student protests or, just democratic protesters overall, right? And that's related to the second thing, which is fundamentally, we are talking about two, I'm not even saying two different nations. I'm saying two different societies with different cultural values. And it'll be akin to saying something like, if let's say Singapore were to rejoin the Federation of the Malaysia, right? Just that we, yes, have the same system. We still get to choose who leads us. We still get to choose our leaders in the GRC, so on and so forth. We still get to maintain our policies. It wouldn't really work because of, the divergence of the development between these, in this case of Malaysia and Singapore, between these two nations alone. Now, between the two societies of Taiwan and China, right? China has a vastly different system as compared to Taiwan. I mean, obviously, China used to be under the communist system. Well, they are still technically communist, but they have adapted it for the modern day, right? Most significantly, obviously, taking all the capitalist market systems, whereas Taiwan has always at least they tried to take the democratic route. Not to say that they were democratic all the way, they were certainly autocratic now and then, especially under Jiang Jieshi's time. But where Taiwan is right now, right, and where China is right now, there is just too many fundamental differences that can allow the, I guess, the so-called blending of these two societies to be under one, under the umbrella of the nation that is China, because the Taiwanese see themselves as an independent state, right? They see themselves as such. So to them, to choose a leader, right, who would facilitate that process would be equivalent to them losing their, or at least to them, they will see it as they lose their independence. Of course, the rest of the world, right, unless they really want to get into trouble with China, the rest of the world has never officially recognized Taiwan as a sovereign state, right? And even Singapore, despite the maintenance of friendly relations with China, China and Taiwan both, we have never said that, hey, Taiwan is a sovereign state. That means we have never said that Taiwan is independent, and we will never say that. That's why you notice I would never call Taiwan a nation. I mean, unless something develops on that end, but it is highly unlikely. So yeah, that's the main breakdown here, right? In terms of the case study of the Taiwanese elections. How then do we use it for our general paper essays? Well, you want to use it in IR essays, international relations, so maybe related to questions like uh peace is never sustainable, something like that. Or peace is always temporary, right? Really abstract ideas like that. If you actually get the question for the A levels, please run far away from it, because it's quite a tough one, because there are a lot of underpinning, sort of like philosophical concepts and ideas and abstract ideas to go and tackle. But you want to, if let's say you want to have points on the optics of nations' policies, what they choose to do in the context of whatever world events that unfold, then this is a great example, to really go and understand, or to, sorry, not understand, to exemplify your point on, the very, very complicated relationships and the undercurrents of cultural and political differences between, two, let's face it, fundamentally different societies as a whole lah. So that's the case of the Taiwanese elections. If you're interested in the history of the relationship between China and Taiwan, I'll urge you to go and read up on it. If you are interested in an even older history, certainly please go and read up on that as well. It's quite interesting lah, that's what I would say. But yeah, history is quite a niche sort of thing. Not everyone enjoys it, but yeah, it will help inform the context of whatever that's occurring right now. So yeah, that's that for the Taiwanese elections. So